The first step in installing a pocket door is going to be to prep the door for hardware, also ripping the bevel off of the side of the door, as well as cutting the door to the proper height so it sits properly above the flooring. For maximum efficiency, I prep all my pocket door slabs at the same time. These slabs are pre-primed. If you're using pre-finished material, make sure you put cardboard or something on top of your sawhorses so it doesn't scratch the door. Standard pre-hung doors always have a 2 to 3 degree bevel on the edge. That makes the doors close properly without binding. That needs to be ripped off for pocket door slabs. That way, whenever the door is in the closed position, it makes solid contact on both sides of the door. Failure to rip off the bevel will mean whenever the door is in the closed position, one side of the door will make contact while the other side doesn't, which will be unsightly. Failure to rip the bevel off will also mean that the door hardware won't mount properly whenever it's installed. Some vendors will sell doors with a square edge rather than beveled. Usually these doors are special ordered, so most of the time I'm working with slabs that have to have the bevel either planed or ripped off with a track saw. Some vendors will sell door slabs that are square edge and ready to be installed as a pocket door. However, a lot of these doors are special order, which requires multiple weeks of lead time, longer than the pre-hungs. So typically, I'm just being supplied with doors that have to have the bevel ripped off. There are two common methods to rip the bevel off. One would be a track saw, the other would be a planer. I find a track saw to be more versatile. However, the old school method would have been to use a planer before track saws were readily available. Both methods work great. I prefer the track saw because I feel it's more versatile. Often I have to use the track saw to cut the door to length also, so the track saw completes two tasks. Here I'm using the Festool TSC 55. It's got lots of power. I've been really impressed with it, and it's great for tasks like this. After the bevel is ripped off, you're going to have some saw marks on the edge of the door. You want to make sure that you sand these off. That way you're not going to see these saw marks through the finish whenever the door's all painted up. I always have a sander plugged in right beside my miter saw, so it's usually pretty easy just to grab that and sand the marks off. If you don't have a power sander nearby, just grab a sheet of 120 grit, maybe a block of wood, and some elbow grease. It's pretty easy just to sand the marks out by hand also. The final step of prepping this door edge is going to be to ease the edges. I've seen other trim carpenters, typically in production settings, leave the edges square. I personally prefer not to do that. Easing the edges gives it a better, more durable edge. It's going to take paint better, and it's also going to take abuse better. I always have a router with an easing bit laying around, typically 1/8 inch radius or 5/32 radius. It's easy just to grab that and hit the edges quickly. A cordless compact router is fantastic for this task. I'm loving these new DeWalt compact cordless routers. Really easy just to pick up, grab, and go. Highly recommend them. An extremely important note, before installation, you always want to make sure your door is cut to the proper height. Meaning you need to look at what your header height is, take that into account, and look at what flooring you're going to have installed on the surface. If your door is installed too low, that's going to create issues down the road after flooring is installed. For carpet, you need to make sure that the bottom of the door is installed at least 1.5 inches above the subfloor. And typically for hard surface flooring like LVT, hardwood, or tile, you want to be 5/8 inch above the finished floor surface. If there's carpet on one side of the door and hardwood on the other, you want to err on the high side because the door is still going to hit the carpet, so that door still needs to be 1.5 inches off the floor or more. I've found that different builders and different framers set the header and track height for their pocket doors at different heights. So this is something that you need to check and inspect on every job to make sure you're where you need to be. Also, further down the road, you'll need to take into consideration how your casing is going to finish out, matching up to your other pre-hung doors, but that's for another video. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to door hardware. In my area, most all of the builders that I've worked for all use these square cutout style door hardware. Now, there are much better pocket door hardware systems, but that all comes with the labor and hardware cost. In my area, it is what it is. This is what I'm always given to install, so that's what I'm going to cover in this video. If you guys have recommendations on hardware for better hardware, cost-effective ways of installing better hardware, etc., I'd love to hear about it. I'm always open to new ideas. Drop a comment below and I'll definitely check it out. One of the core principles of production carpentry, or carpentry in general, is that if you're going to do a task more than a couple times, make a jig for it. So, as you can see here, this is my extremely high-end, extremely fancy pocket door hardware cutout jig. All it consists of is some scrap wood out of the trash can, a little bit of CA glue, and about 5 minutes of time, but this thing has really worked well for me, and I keep it in one of my toolboxes, pull it out on every job for pocket door install. An extremely important note here, always double check which end of the door you're measuring from when marking for your hardware cutout. If you measure from the top of the door on accident, it'll ruin the door. Be very easy to do, so always double check yourself and measure from the correct end of the door. When cutting out for your hardware, there's a technique with the jigsaw that's very simple, very easy, but it's very important. You don't want to start by plunging straight in with the blade in the plumb position. Otherwise, jigsaw blades are prone to wander. What you want to do is rock your jigsaw back so that you're starting into the cut on the very corner of the door, and then slowly rock the jigsaw forward so that the blade's in the plumb position. That's going to allow you to cut perfectly along your pencil line, and the wandering blade is not going to be an issue. After you've got your 2 plunge cuts made coming into the door, you need to make the back cut for the back of the hardware. This cut's tricky too. What you don't want to do is turn the jigsaw drastically as you try to plunge in to make that cut. Turning the jigsaw quickly while cutting will kick the blade out of plumb and could potentially cause issues. So make a couple plunge cuts and gradually ease the blade into that back cut, and it'll help keep the blade plumb. The door hardware won't tell you to do this on the directions, but I've found with privacy hardware, a lot of times the locking mechanism will get hung up on the back of the mortise. So I take a 1-inch drill bit and just drill a shallow hole, and that ensures that hardware won't hit the back, causing any issues. Door hardware is never on site at the time of millwork installation, so I keep an extra privacy lock set in one of my toolboxes. That way I can test the fit and make sure everything's working correctly. You can see here I turn the locking mechanism and it's not binding up on anything. Making these cutouts at the time of rough millwork installation is better because it's done before paint, which means our jigsaw is not going to scuff up the door or anything like that. It's also easier to make these cutouts on the sawhorses rather than whenever the door is installed in the opening. Batching tasks together increases efficiency, so it's a good idea to always prep all the slabs together at the same time before installing any of the pocket doors in the openings. If you found this video helpful and want to support more content like this, you can purchase these tools from my Amazon store, and that'll give me a kickback and help support more content like this. You can see in this video, got the TSC 55, DeWalt blower, hardware, DeWalt compact router, brushless jigsaw, and of course the Festool ETS EC 150/5 sander, which is my personal favorite. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment in the video if you enjoyed it. Give me some feedback. Let me know if you do anything different on your jobs.